Hello and welcome to Government 101. I'm Eileen Preston. Before I introduce our guest, I'd like you to imagine trying to fill out a lengthy job application when you only have a cell phone. Or perhaps you're a remote worker and your Zoom is a little spotty, sometimes not reliable on the internet, and suddenly it goes down. Or you're an elderly person and you live alone, you have a telehealth appointment, you're not sure if you have a webcam, you wouldn't know how to install it if you had it. So these are all digital frustrations, but if they happen over and over again, it's called digital inequity. And our guest today, Stephen Tupper. He is the Deputy Director of Cape Cod Commission. He's here today and he's going to help us walk through this and how the Cape Cod Commission is helping. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's first time in our studios, so
Absolutely.
welcome. We hope to have you back a lot. So digital inequity, do I have those scenarios right? Is that what that is?
Correct. Those are a lot of great examples. Certainly the issues are very individual and it may be different person to person, household to household. But generally it's about doing the basic life things that we need to do, like you said, healthcare, banking, jobs. And if you have challenges getting online to do those where many of those services live, that's what digital inequity is.
So the Cape Cod Commission is having, we should say right off the top, they're having a community workshop in Falmouth. And what are you looking to do in this community workshop? It's December 11th.
Correct. In short, we're trying to listen to the community, understand what are the biggest community needs within the town of Falmouth. So we're working with the town of Falmouth and the Falmouth MLP to understand what are the biggest barriers for folks doing activities online, whether it be the connection, whether it be their device or their skills or knowledge. And the community workshops are one aspect of our outreach where we want folks to be able to come in and share the challenges so we can work with the town to develop solutions.
So you're going to have a workshop, you're asking people to come. This is about whether they like their internet, whether they think there's enough competition, if the speed is good, reliability, whether they can afford it. Okay. December 11th, I just want to make sure I get that out, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Hermann Room in the Falmouth Main Library. Great. Okay, great. So the Cape Cod Commission is doing this. Why? What brought this up in the first place?
Sure, we're doing it to support the town of Falmouth and the Falmouth MLP. They applied for state funds to have us come in and do this planning activity. And
Sorry, you're saying MLP, but
the Falmouth Municipal Light Plant.
Right.
So that group and other related groups have been doing work in this space, both in terms of digital inequity, in terms of increasing broadband options. So they've been working with the town, and this was one of the efforts to try to bring some more resources to the town. So we'll be developing a plan for the town, and then ultimately that'll qualify them for funding to go to implement some of the strategies that we identify through this process.
So is this with the Municipal Light Board that Falmouth has? We already have a board with 5 members on it. They're writing a plan, and the Cape Cod Commission is also writing a plan, or how does it work?
So ultimately, the Cape Cod Commission is here to facilitate the process and draft the plan. It should be a plan that guides the town going forward. We have representation from both the Municipal Light Plant Board as well as the town of Falmouth. We want to see everyone working together to develop this plan ultimately for the residents of Falmouth.
Okay, so you're getting information from all the towns, getting the input, trying to get your arms around what towns have what problems. Mm-hmm. And where have you been so far?
So far we have completed a plan with the town of Bourne, town of Sandwich, town of Orleans, and are currently working with the town of Barnstable. So we've seen a lot of common challenges across those towns and some unique things in the towns as well.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. I'm also interested, first of all, what are you hearing mostly? Mm-hmm. And is the Cape got special problems? Because I imagine we're kind of special. We probably have a special problem, right?
Of course we are. We are special, and there are special problems. So I'll start out with the thing we hear most commonly, and that's a lack of competition and the related affordability issues with broadband. Yeah. So we generally have very few options in terms of residential broadband service, and we're generally running on cable, coax cable. The thing that powers your TV is also powering our internet for the most part, and that's not common across the Commonwealth. Much of the Commonwealth has fiber internet, which is a more robust long-term internet option, and the Cape only has access. 1.9% of households on the Cape have access to that, whereas more like half of the Commonwealth, so we're quite behind.
So 2% almost 2% of the Cape has fiber. Mm-hmm. And then the rest have something that's a little bit more spotty. Are there places on the Cape that actually have no internet access whatsoever?
There are a number of locations that have been identified that have no current access. There's actually some state programs right now going in to try to address some of those locations. Relatively few locations with a complete lack of access, but there are locations that certainly have reliability issues. That's the other thing we're hearing commonly, particularly in the summer, issues with the reliability of the service.
Yeah, I'm thinking like Lieutenant's Island and Wellfleet or something, right? Do they even have internet access?
I believe they do in that location, but
Okay.
there are some similar remote areas that don't have access.
Yeah, tough. Okay. So if we could talk a little bit about, first of all, fiber, if you could just explain coaxial versus fiber, how does that work?
So in simple terms, the coax cable is the cable that you've always used to plug in your TV and get service. And then as the telecommunication industry has evolved, that has been the way that most people are getting TV, phone, and internet. And that's really the only main option here on the Cape for residential use. Fiber is an entirely different technology. It allows for much higher speeds and much more robust in the long term. And we certainly have some notable fiber deployments. Particularly Open Cape has connected a lot of larger clients, a lot of nonprofits, municipal locations, and some large businesses. We're starting to see some fiber deployment from Verizon. Fios would be the kind of commercial product I used to. Comcast has fiber for businesses. We're starting to see some of those deployments, but still pretty small in numbers across the Cape.
And when you say Open Cape, I know Falmouth has Open Cape right on our main street. Our businesses, our town municipal building, Open Cape is doing that. Yeah, that's great. So you're going through all this. What's the timeline to get the information? You're going to get the information from Falmouth. You've got it from quite a few towns. Are you going to do all 15 towns? And what's the timeline? Excuse me.
So we're doing towns individually because there are some individual needs. So Falmouth and Barnstable are the last two we're currently working with. We are doing efforts regionally as well, though, because we're certainly hearing some things that are common across towns and some things where multi-town solutions make more sense. So some of the common challenges have to do with digital skills and literacy, and that's something we're seeing across the spectrum. And we're seeing a lot of individual agencies and individual organizations like the Falmouth Library and the Senior Center doing great programs, but there's a lot of learning that can be had across those. So we're certainly going to be doing some regional solutions in that front. But to look at Falmouth specifically, we'll be collecting information over the next couple months, finishing the plan in early 2025, and then the town can go after implementation funding.
So am I correct that this all came about because during COVID, we all had to work at home, stay at home, learn at home, and people just, their broadband was breaking or they didn't have the tools, or is this how this all came about?
Certainly the funding for this came directly from there.
Okay.
The internet in many ways went from a luxury to a necessity for many more people during that. And that's when it became really apparent that the issues were really not the same individual to individual and household to household. And that inequity was certainly magnified. And we knew certainly many older individuals, maybe home alone in the house, trying to sign up for some sort of medical appointment. And again, they either didn't have the connection, the device, or the knowledge to make that appointment they needed. So really the inequity became quite apparent, and the funding here was to address that specifically, whether it be age-related, income-related, language-related. There's a lot of different populations with some unique challenges in this space.
So what are you hearing that in the Cape specifically that you think surprised you, or are you hearing different things from different towns? What are you hearing?
I'd say two things. What surprised me first is the amount of grassroots effort that came up during the pandemic to solve some of these solutions.
Heroes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're what would generally be called digital navigators, people that help people navigate the space. They don't call themselves that. They may be the librarian that you walk in and they can help you with your computer. You may go to the senior center and they have a class on how to do this. Those things popped up very organically. But it's been clear there's a greater need than there is current resources in that space. So that's been common across the Cape and something we've really seen an acute problem for our region.
What about different towns? Are you hearing any, this town has this problem and this has another, or are they pretty similar?
A lot of common problems, but there's a lot of unique populations that are showing up in different communities. Certainly in Barnstable, we're seeing a great amount of diversity there. Also in Falmouth and really common across the schools, we're seeing a lot more diversity in the school-age population. So a lot of families that have some different barriers. Maybe the cost of the service is an issue. Maybe they're sharing a device across the household that's really not purpose-built for what they're using it for. So really some unique challenges in the families on the Cape in particular.
So it sounds like the heroes of this story can sometimes be the senior centers or centers of aging, councils on aging, excuse me. I struggle with that one. Senior moment for the senior moment. So they have helped. I know I did a story on Shine, how to sign up for Medicare. All of that's online, right? Super tricky, right? If you're elderly and this is a struggle and you've got to switch docs. And so it sounds like they're doing a lot of heavy lifting as well as libraries. Is there anybody else?
I'm not just saying this because I'm here, but certainly community television across a number of towns has been really important about both getting word out about these sort of things, but also directly providing services and really interacting with the members of the community. So we've really seen this as a really kind of out front way to talk about some of these problems, and it's been certainly part of the solution across the Cape.
And well, thank you for saying that. And maybe some digital skills classes, right? Like that would probably be helpful for a lot of people. So you're going to expect your report to be done when?
In early 2025, currently targeting a March-April timeframe, and that will allow the town to have the time to apply for the implementation funding.
Okay, great. And so when you wave your magic wand and you get your money, where do you most want to see that money go?
That's a great question. To be honest, it's not a question for me to answer because it's about what are the community needs in Falmouth and what are the priorities in Falmouth. And that's why some of this community engagement is so important. I certainly can come up with a handful of solutions that would be great, whether it be different additional classes, focuses on devices, looking at how do we encourage competition, all worthwhile things, but ultimately it has to be what are the residents of Falmouth need most. And we certainly know that the funding from this won't solve all of the problems, but it'll make a good step in that direction. So I hope that the town, through this process, can identify some really specific things to move forward and also think more broadly about digital equity and everything that's done here.
Yeah, because you think about it, the whole world is on the internet, right? You have to do your banking there, or your health care, or even your socialization, right? Which is super important for your mental health, right? So, yeah. I was wondering about the infrastructure too, because you're also studying that. The Cape Cod Commission is also studying the infrastructure. How is it?
Well, as is the case with many of our infrastructure elements, getting older. And certainly in many respects, we've been an afterthought in some of this. So I talked earlier about the deployment of fiber. We're much behind the rest of the Commonwealth in that. And certainly it's been really a challenge given our seasonal population, where much of that infrastructure is built out for the year-round residents, and then it's really struggles in the summer. So we've been seeing investments by a lot of the providers that are already in the market in recent years, trying to address some of those challenges, but certainly quite a bit more to tackle in the coming years. And I think a common thread is that competition helps. Certainly it encourages investment by all if there's a competitive marketplace, and certainly Falmouth in particular has been very active at pointing out the fact that that doesn't exist, and that is resulting in a lot of the challenges that we're seeing today. So that's, I'd say, one of the biggest challenges. The lack of competition really doesn't encourage investment that's needed. Yeah,
it's hard to encourage competition, isn't it, right? Get the companies there. So I heard you once say that there's a couple of cables, fiber cables, that go over the bridge. Is that how we're connected to the internet? Like physically, where is this stuff?
So that's certainly the largest connection, is the actual physical cables running over the bridges.
And they're fiber?
There's all sorts of connections running over the bridges, but for the most part, yes, fiber is the backhaul, what takes all the information and pushes it to the larger network because it can handle that. So yes, fiber going over the canal bridges is the number one way that we get our information. There are others, but even if you think like a cell phone, much of that is still powered by that same backbone of fiber to the cell towers.
And are the wires actually on the bridge, tied to the rails, or how does it work? Are they under the water? Where are they? You're an engineer, so I know you know the answer to this. I'm
an engineer, but I certainly don't want to speak outside of my expertise. But I will say there are fibers running on all three of the bridges, both the Bourne, Sagamore, and the rail bridge currently.
Okay, and so when we lose one of the bridges, we're even more vulnerable, right? Because these are just little connections, right?
Certainly, we want to make sure that we continue to be connected both for transportation and for communications like we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I know they're looking at utility relocation as part of the Canal Bridge project. There may be some opportunities to go underground and do other things. Certainly, we want to be resilient in the long term.
Yeah, okay. So fiber is good because it's more durable in hurricanes? Is that why we want fiber, or?
It's essentially a future-proof technology. There's a lot more capacity within the fiber. Over time, our needs online have increased such an amount that the demand on that network continues to increase, and the capacity of the fiber is much greater than that of the traditional cable that we see today.
Okay. Do you know the right speed that a household should expect? I'm sure it differs if you have one person in the house or if you have 3 online learners and 2 remote workers, but is there a speed?
There are certainly different speed thresholds different speeds that are appropriate depending on what the needs are within the household. I can go a little bit deeper on that, but it really is an individual need. One thing that's been interesting recently is the definition of broadband has actually been changed. Broadband speed has actually been changed over the last couple of years because of this. So not to get too wonky into the details, but there's a specific threshold of 100 megabytes down and 25 up that's required for broadband class speed.
Okay.
And you can certainly get to higher levels. There's gig service that is great, like if you're a business, but for the most part, the folks that we're hearing from do actually have access to the speeds that they're needed, but they may be struggling affording it, or reliability are kind of the 2 issues. So generally, we do have access to reasonable level speeds, but are we actually receiving it is the bigger question.
Okay, wow, okay. So how do you know what your speed is? Do you call up the company and say, hey, what's my internet speed?
So the simplest way is there are online speed tests. So you can run a speed test and see if you're actually receiving what you're paying for.
Oh, interesting.
So there's actually a process over the last year where individuals can challenge whether or not they're receiving the speeds that they're paying for. So certainly an online speed test would be the most straightforward way to see what sort of speeds you're receiving. Certainly interesting to do if you notice that you have issues and the streaming that you're doing is not working. You can run a speed test to see if it's related to your connection, or sometimes it's upstream and not actually related to what's happening in your house, but maybe happening at Netflix or something else unrelated.
Yeah, okay, great, okay. So you're going to have this open house, and you're going to ask these people how they feel about their internet, right? And what are you expecting to hear? Has anything surprised you that you've said, wow, I did not expect that? I mean, I'd like to know about, are people concerned about their privacy online? It's expensive to try to cover yourself because you've got to get virus protection, or maybe your phone is not, maybe it's not an Apple, or maybe you've got some little generic thing and you think, well, there's less protection for this. Is that a concern for people?
Absolutely. Privacy is coming across as one of the biggest concerns that folks are having, and it's leading to people either choosing not to engage in some of the activities because of fear of privacy, or doing it knowing that they're unsafe with what they're doing. And we certainly see in the paper regularly stories about scams, and this just really makes it happen a lot more quickly when someone isn't as comfortable with what they're doing online. So I certainly expect to hear stories about that. There are resources out there for individuals who have either been a victim of some sort of online crime or just want to learn more to avoid that.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that they're aware of resources. And what I hope to hear is some creative solutions. So I've been surprised by a number of members of the community that know exactly what they want, and they just might want to come here and say, this is the sort of course that I would love to take if someone were to offer it. That's the sort of information we want to be able to gather and share with those organizations.
I think it's a really good question. If we offered you a course, what do you want to learn about the internet? I got some ideas.
Excellent. You're the first person on the list.
I would. I love it. So this will be at the Hermann Library, and it's a community workshop, and this is for businesses too, right?
Absolutely. Businesses, families, residences, anyone who is concerned with their internet connection, devices, or skills.
Anybody who uses the internet or might need to get online because it's so important, right? I don't know who's not using the internet, but they probably would like to, and they probably like to do it safely and reliably. There'll be refreshments there?
Absolutely.
We're there. Yeah.
We will get some refreshments from a local vendor. We want to make sure people are comfortable. We'll have a little discussion at the beginning, kind of set up the context to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, and then it's just a discussion.
Wonderful, wonderful. So is there anything else you want to say about it before we end this?
I certainly want to, again, repeat the event is December 11th, 5:30 at the Falmouth Public Library. We've had a lot of great partners in the town of Falmouth working in this space, both organizations and individuals. Really love to hear from more members of the community in this event. And certainly if there's others that aren't able to make the event, there's other ways to get engaged as well. We want to hear from everyone within the town of Falmouth.
It's really important work, and there are people doing a lot of heavy lifting, like the Senior Center and a Center on Active Living. And I think it's so helpful, you know, the hot spots that the library loans out, these things are really, they're really kind of essential to our living today, right? So thank you, Stephen Tupper. I wish you great luck with this. I think we're going to be there to hear some of the solutions, or at least some of the questions that people have. I thank you and hope you come back again to talk to us, maybe about the bridges.
Thank you. Happy to come back.
All right. Thank you very much. This has been Government 101. We appreciate you, and thanks for watching.